This is video 8. We present here the 4 macroscopic lemmas. First, we define square areas. Consider an integer lambda. The square of width lambda designs the set of positions which are in the first quadrant of the plane and at distance less than lambda of the origin of the plane. Along this video, we consider a deterministic tile assembly system T and a path assembly P which satisfies macroscopic conditions. The assembly alpha is the unique terminal assembly of the tile assembly system T. We will consider several bounds and functions along this video. The definitions can be found in the appendix of the article available online. The bounds are numbered from 1 to 6 by increasing order. B1 is less than B2 which is less than B3. The two functions defined in the appendix are psi and delta. We introduce now the first macroscopic lemma called the seed lemma. A path assembly satisfies the seed constraint if and only if the domain of the seed belongs to the square of width B1. In the example on the right, some tiles of the seed are outside the square B1. Then the path assembly does not satisfy the seed constraint. The seed lemma states that a path assembly which does not satisfy the seed constraint is pumpable, thus the path assembly on the right is pumpable. Here is a new path assembly which satisfies the seed constraint. Note that the position of the seed depends on the path assembly since we consider macroscopic conditions. There are two interpretations of this lemma. The first one is that a path assembly which satisfies the macroscopic conditions cannot grow more than a distance B1 to the south or to the west of the seed without being pumpable. The second interpretation is that the distance from the seed to the origin of the plane is less than B1. We introduce now the second macroscopic lemma called the reset lemma. First, consider a distance lambda. We represent here the square of width lambda. Now, we represent the square of width psi lambda. Then we consider a tile of the path assembly P whose position is not inside the square of width psi lambda. The index of this tile is A1. Now we consider a tile of the path assembly P whose position is inside the square of width lambda. The index of this tile is I2. In this example it is possible to choose these indices such that I1 is less than I2. If these conditions are fulfilled and the path assembly P does not satisfy the reset constraint for the square of width lambda. The reset lemma states that if the reset constraint are not fulfilled for the square of width lambda and if the square of width lambda contains the domain of the seed then the path assembly P is pumpable. Thus the path assembly in our example is pumpable. Here is a path assembly which satisfies the reset constraint for the square of width lambda. Intuitively, the reset lemma means that the more a path assembly grows far away from the origin of the plane, the more it must stay away from it, otherwise it is pumpable. This lemma is useful to forget about artifacts which are created near the seed. In this example, after leaving the square of width phi lambda, the path assembly has to stay away from the seed by at least a distance of 4. We introduce now the third macroscopic lemma called the shift lemma. The hypotheses of the shift constraint are longer than the other constraints. First, consider the square of width B4. This square is called the shift zone. Then consider an index as such that the seed and the segment from 1 to S of P belongs to the square of width B4. Now consider a vector V whose norm is bounded by B2 and such this vector is directed to the north. Now consider minus V. Consider the translation by minus V of the segment of P from S to the last tile of P. The path assembly satisfies the shift constraints for S and V if the assembly induced by this translated segment is a subassembly of the unique terminal assembly alpha. The shift lemma states that there exists S and V such that the path assembly P satisfies the shift constraint for S and V, otherwise P is pumpable. This lemma means that when a path assembly grows outside of the square of width B4 then the end of the path assembly can be translated by minus V. This lemma is powerful and is the key to conclude the proof. Its proof is hard. In fact, the demonstration of this lemma is the last part of the proof. We have 4 remarks about this lemma. First, note that the translation of p by minus v is not necessarily as the first quadrant of the plane. Secondly, we define a vector v and we use the vector minus v. This is due to the fact that in the proof of the shift lemma, we will work with a candidate segment of the path assembly p of direction v. We prefer to keep the same direction for the vector v in the different parts of the videos. Thirdly, the seed lemma is a subcase of the shift lemma. In fact, the seed lemma will not be used from now on. Nevertheless, the seed lemma is crucial for the proof of the shift lemma and the proof of the reset lemma. We introduce the macroscopic lemmas in this order because we think it is more pedagogical. Fourthly, the shift constraint implies that p and p minus v are consistent. We introduce now the fourth macroscopic lemma called a jail lemma. The shift lemma states that the end of the path assembly p can be translated by a vector v. Then we are interested in the interactions between p and p minus v. The next videos are dedicated to this study, but we partially answer this question here. If p and p minus v does not intersect, then p is pumpable. More formally, consider a distance lambda and the square of width lambda. Now consider an index I1 such that the seed and the segment of p from 1 to I1 belongs to the square of width lambda. Now consider the square of width delta lambda. Now consider an index I2 such that the position pi2 is not in the square of width delta lambda. Then we consider the segment of p from I1 to I2. Consider a vector v whose norm is bounded by b2. Let's translate the segment by minus v. Now we claim that if these two segments does not intersect, then p is pumpable. This remark concludes the presentation of the 4 macroscopic lemmas. In the 3 following videos, we demonstrate that these 4 lemmas led to the main result.